The rest stop lights buzzed faintly above them, their glow pale and tired. The world outside was still a handful of moths circling the lamps, the quiet hum of distant traffic. Inside the car, silence hung heavy, not empty but full, like the air after a storm when the sky hasn't quite decided whether to clear or break again. Claire turned the key, and the engine rumbled back to life. The headlights stretched forward, spilling white across the asphalt, and she eased them back onto the highway. The road unfurled endlessly, black ribbon beneath the stars. Ethan sat beside her, quieter now, his confession having drained him. His eyes were glassy, but his shoulders looked lighter, as though the burden he had carried for so long had finally been set down. If only for a moment. Claire gripped the steering wheel, her own heart still raw. She hadn't expected tonight to turn into this. She had thought it would be about missed exits and recalculated GPS routes. That life had a way of surprising her, tugging her into places she hadn't planned to go. And perhaps, she thought, that was the point. For a while, they drove in silence. The steady rhythm of the tires, the low hum of the engine, the occasional flash of headlights from a passing car, all of it wrapped around them like a cocoon. Claire glanced at her son, wondering if he had drifted into sleep. But then his voice, quiet and uncertain, broke through the stillness. "Mom," he whispered. "Yes, sweetheart?" His eyes didn't leave the dark horizon ahead. His hands twisted in his lap. "Have you ever loved someone you couldn't have?" The question landed like a stone in her chest. For a moment she couldn't answer. Memories stirred long buried, fragile things she had sealed away. She felt herself pulled back across the years, to a time when she had been just as young, just as reckless, just as hopelessly consumed by a love that could never be hers. Her breath caught. She thought of him, the boy she had fallen for when she was 16. Not really a boy, not in the way she had been a girl. He had been older, a teacher's assistant at her high school. He wasn't supposed to notice her, wasn't supposed to linger when their eyes met, wasn't supposed to make her feel like the world stopped whenever he smiled. But he had, and for a few fleeting weeks, she had believed the impossible, that they could belong to each other. And then, it had ended. As quickly as it had begun, it had ended. He had walked away, choosing what was right. She had been left with the ache, the emptiness, the cruel truth that some loves were not meant to be lived, only carried in secret. Even now, decades later, the memory made her chest tighten. She glanced at Ethan, her lips trembling with words she hadn't planned to speak. "Yes," she said softly. Her voice cracked on the single word. Ethan turned to her sharply, his eyes wide, his expression caught between surprise and relief. "You have?" Claire nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the endless stretch of highway. "When I was about your age, I loved someone I couldn't have, and it nearly broke me." Ethan swallowed hard. "What happened?" She exhaled, the sound heavy with years of silence. "He walked away. Because he had to. Because sometimes love isn't enough, not when it hurts more people than it heals." Her hands tightened on the wheel. It felt like the end of the world. "I thought I'd never breathe again without him. But I survived. I learned that loving someone doesn't always mean being with them. Sometimes it means letting them go, even when it tears you apart." Ethan's lips parted, his breath shaky. "Did you ever forget him?" Claire's eyes shimmered with tears she didn't let fall. "No, not really, but the memory changed over time. It stopped being a wound, and it became a reminder of how deep I could feel, how alive love could make me. even if it wasn't mine to keep. The car filled with silence again. But it was a softer silence this time, less heavy, more like a blanket drawn over the raw edges of their words. Ethan leaned back against the seat, his face pale but thoughtful. So maybe that's what I have to do. Just let it be a memory. Claire's heart ached at the resignation in his voice, at the way he sounded too old for 16. Maybe. Or maybe it will pass like a storm. You're young, Ethan. Feelings like this, they're powerful, but they're not always forever. Sometimes they're just teachers. They teach us who we are, what we want, what kind of love we're searching for. She reached over, her hand brushing against his. But whatever happens, you don't have to face it alone. You have me. Always. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned his hand upward and intertwined his fingers with hers. Not like a child clinging to his mother for safety. Not like the boy who used to hold her hand while crossing the street. But like a young man reaching out for connection, for grounding, for truth. And Claire held on. The road stretched endlessly, but something in her chest felt lighter now. They weren't just mother and son tonight. They were two souls sharing the weight of forbidden loves, bound together by vulnerability and trust. The GPS finally pinged, recalculating their route, guiding them home. Claire smiled faintly at the irony. They had been lost for hours, but in that lostness, they had found something far more important. Ethan rested his head back against the seat, his eyelids heavy. Thanks, Mom, he murmured, his voice thick with exhaustion. For not freaking out. For listening. Claire's eyes softened, her heart aching with love. Thank you, she whispered back, for trusting me. He drifted toward sleep, his breathing evening out, the lines of worry fading from his face. Claire glanced at him, her heart swelling with pride, sorrow, and something deeper, something like gratitude. Because tonight, on a dark highway they hadn't meant to take, she had been given a gift. A window into her son's heart, a chance to guide him through one of the hardest lessons of love. And though the night had been long, though the confession had shaken her, she knew this truth. They were no longer lost, not on the highway, not in each other. The hum of the highway had become unbearable. Claire's hands gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Ethan's words replayed in her mind on a loop. Once I tell you, you'll never see me the same again. She couldn't take it anymore. Up ahead. A blue sign appeared. Rest area, 1 mile. Relief washed over her, though it was fragile, trembling at the edges. She slowed the car, the turn signal clicking rhythmically, and guided them into the quiet, dimly lit parking lot. The lot was almost empty, save for a single truck parked under the glow of a flickering light. Claire pulled into a space far from it, killed the engine, and let the sudden silence settle around them. The world outside was still. Only the faint buzz of insects in the summer night filled the air. She turned to her son. Her heart was pounding, so hard she wondered if he could hear it. Ethan, she said softly, her voice breaking with the weight of everything unsaid. Whatever it is, I want to hear it. I need to hear it. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the dashboard as though the glowing speedometer held the answers he couldn't find. His hands trembled slightly in his lap. He wasn't a little boy anymore, but in that moment he looked so fragile, so unbearably young. Finally, he drew in a breath, and with it came words that had been buried too long. It's my best friend's mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. Claire's heart stopped. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, heavy and shocking, echoing in the silence of the car. For a moment, she didn't know how to breathe. Ethan pressed his palms against his face, muffling his voice as he continued. I know it's wrong. I know it doesn't make sense. But she makes me feel like I matter. Like she actually sees me. And I can't stop thinking about her. I don't know how to stop. Claire sat frozen, her breath shallow, her thoughts spinning out of control. His best friend's mom, a woman older than him, a woman who should know better. Her instincts as a mother roared inside her, protect him, guide him, pull him away from the fire before it consumed him. But at the same time, another part of her stirred, the part of her that remembered. Because once, long ago, she had been 16 too. She remembered her own heart, fragile and reckless. She remembered falling for someone she shouldn't have her. Teacher's assistant at her high school. He had been only a few years older, but still it had been forbidden. She remembered the way his attention had made her feel. Special, seen, chosen. And she remembered the heartbreak when he'd ended it, choosing what was right over what they both wanted. The ache of it had stayed with her for years. Now, staring at Ethan, she saw that same storm inside him. That same dangerous mixture of desire and desperation. Ethan, she whispered, her throat tight. He lowered his hands, his eyes red, his lips trembling. Say something, Mom. Please, I can't stand you just looking at me like that. Her first instinct was to scold him, to tell him this was foolish, impossible, dangerous. But when she opened her mouth, what came out wasn't anger, it was raw, aching compassion. Oh, sweetheart, she murmured, reaching out and covering his trembling hand with hers. You're not broken, you're just human. Feelings don't always make sense. They're messy and complicated, and sometimes they take us places we never imagined. His eyes widened, as if her words had cracked something inside him. So you don't hate me? Hate you? Her voice shook as tears filled her eyes. Ethan, I could never hate you. You're my son. Nothing will ever change that. He exhaled shakily, leaning back against the seat, his body almost collapsing from the relief of being heard. But the pain was still there, etched into every line of his face. Claire squeezed his hand. But Ethan, listen to me. Love, real love, isn't just about how someone makes you feel. It's about the choices you make with those feelings. Do you understand? He nodded faintly, though his eyes were still glassy. I try to tell myself it's just a crush, that it'll pass. But every time I see her, it hurts more. And it's not like I can tell anyone. I can't even tell my best friend. He'd never forgive me. His voice cracked on the last word, and Claire felt her heart shatter. She reached out, brushing his hair back from his forehead, just like she used to when he was small. You're carrying too much alone, she whispered, and that's why it feels unbearable. But you've done the right thing by telling me. You're not alone anymore. His lips trembled. But what do I do now? Claire swallowed hard. She wished she had an easy answer, but she didn't. She thought of her own past, of the man she had once loved but could never have. How the longing had nearly consumed her. How the letting go had nearly destroyed her. But how eventually it had taught her the difference between desire and love. You take it one day at a time, she said softly. You remind yourself that not every feeling has to be followed. Some loves are meant to stay in the heart, not in your hands. Ethan's eyes filled again, and a tear slid down his cheek. It feels impossible. I know, Claire whispered, her own tears falling now. I know it does. For a moment they sat there in silence, mother and son, Two hearts bruised by the weight of forbidden love, hers in the past, his in the present. Claire realized something then, something unexpected. Being lost on the highway tonight wasn't an accident. It was as if life had conspired to give them this moment, to pull them off the familiar path, and into this space where truth could finally be spoken. And though the road ahead, both the literal and the emotional one, was still uncertain, Claire knew one thing for certain. This was the night. Her son stopped being a boy she protected from the world, and became a young man she would walk beside, guiding him through the storms of his own heart. She leaned over, pressing her lips gently against his temple. "You're stronger than you think, Ethan. And one day, you'll find a love that isn't complicated, that doesn't have to hide in the shadows. Until then, I'm here." Ethan closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like he hadn't in years. And in that quiet moment, with the hum of the rest-stop lights above them and the vast, dark highway stretching endlessly beyond, Claire realized that this confession, this raw, painful truth had brought them closer than they had been in a long, long time. But she also knew this was not the end of the conversation. It was only the beginning. The soft glow of the dashboard cast pale light across Ethan's face. He sat with his shoulders hunched forward slightly, as though the weight of what he carried had bent him over time. Outside, the world was a blur of night trees sliding past, the occasional road sign glowing green, and then vanishing into darkness. Claire drove in silence, but her chest was a storm. Every instinct she had as a mother screamed that this was more than a casual thought. Her son wasn't the kind to dramatize things. If Ethan said he had something important to tell her, it meant he had been holding it inside for too long. Air in the car felt heavier now, thick with unsaid words. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. His hands were restless, fidgeting with the frayed edge of his hoodie. His lips pressed together, released, pressed again. It reminded her of when he was small and used to bite his lower lip whenever he was about to confess he had broken something in the house. But this was different. This wasn't the guilt of a boy. This was the ache of a young man. Her pulse quickened. "Ethan," she said gently, her voice softer than the hum of the engine. "You don't have to be afraid of telling me anything. Whatever it is, you can trust me." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple rising and falling. "I know," he whispered. "That's the problem." Claire frowned, tightening her grip on the steering wheel. The problem? She wanted to press him, to tell him to just spit it out. But she knew better. If she rushed him, he would retreat into silence again, like he had so many times before. Instead, she eased her foot off the gas, letting the car slow slightly, as though giving him time to find his voice. The road stretched ahead, lonely and quiet. The GPS still hadn't recalculated. They were, in every sense, off the map. Ethan finally pulled in a deep breath. His voice trembled, though he tried to steady it. "You always told me to be honest, to say the truth, even if it hurts, right?" Claire nodded. "Yes, always." For a moment she thought he might stop there, that he'd change his mind, put his earbuds back in, and escape into silence again. But then he said it. "There's someone in my life, Mom. Someone I can't stop thinking about. And it's not simple. It's not normal." Her breath caught. Someone. The word pierced her, opening 100 questions in her mind. A girl from school? An older woman? All her thoughts spiraled faster than she could control. Her lips parted, but she forced herself not to react too quickly. "Someone?" she echoed, steadying her tone. Ethan nodded slowly. His gaze stayed fixed out the window, on the blur of night rushing past them. "Yeah. And I don't know what to do with it. Because if I tell you, If I tell anyone, it changes everything. The tremor in his voice cut through her. This wasn't a silly crush. This wasn't something light. This was serious, deep something that had been growing inside him until it threatened to break him apart. Claire's heart tightened painfully. Her mind flew back to when she was his age. 16. She remembered it vividly, how love at that age wasn't small or soft. It was overwhelming. Every glance, every word, every secret touch felt like the end of the world or the beginning of it. She remembered the boy she had fallen for back then, someone she wasn't supposed to love. The heartbreak that followed when she had to let him go. She still carried the scar of that love. And now, watching her son, she realized he was walking that same fragile line between longing and heartbreak. Her voice was gentle. Ethan. Who is it? He flinched as though the question itself was too sharp. His hands tightened in his lap. He shook his head once quickly. I can't say yet, he murmured. I need you to understand first. I need you to know. It's not about anyone random. It's about someone who matters. Someone who makes me feel alive, seen. Claire's throat tightened. Seen. That word. How many people in her own life had failed to see her when she needed it most? How many times had she longed for someone to look past the surface and recognize the ache inside her? Her chest ached. With empathy. Ethan, she whispered, her voice breaking without her meaning to. You're scaring me. He turned toward her then, his eyes catching the faint light of the dashboard. They were wide, vulnerable, almost pleading. I don't want to scare you. I don't know how else to say it. If I keep it inside, I'll explode. Claire felt the tears threatening, but she blinked them back, forcing strength into her voice. Listen to me. You're my son. There's nothing you could say that would make me stop loving you. Do you hear me? His eyes flickered, his lips trembling with unspoken words. He nodded faintly, but she could see it, the storm still raging inside him. For a few moments, silence filled the car again. The engine hummed. The tires rolled and the night wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. Claire's thoughts spun in circles. Who could it be? A girl from school? A friend? Someone older? Someone forbidden? Her stomach knotted at the possibilities. Finally, Ethan exhaled slowly. His voice was barely above a whisper. It's not just who, Mom. It's what it means if I tell you. Because once I do, you'll never see me the same again. His words sliced through her. She reached out instinctively, her free hand brushing against his arm. Sweetheart, nothing could change how I see you. You're my son. You'll always be my son. But inside, she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure what truth he carried, only that it frightened him enough to believe it might shatter everything. The car's headlights illuminated another sign, another exit for a town she didn't recognize. Still she drove on the road, stretching endlessly. But it wasn't the road that mattered now. It was Ethan, her boy, her almost man who was sitting beside her, trembling with a secret that threatened to undo him. And as the silence deepened again, Claire realized this was only the beginning. He hadn't told her everything yet, not even close. The night was quiet, yet it wasn't the kind of quiet that brought peace. It was the kind that carried weight, like an unfinished conversation, like an unspoken secret pressing against the chest. The hum of the tires against the asphalt was steady, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Claire gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, her knuckles faintly pale in the glow of the dashboard lights. It was supposed to be simple. A late drive back home after spending the weekend at her sister's house. Nothing unusual, she had made the trip countless times before. But somehow, tonight, in the middle of that endless stretch of highway, she had missed the exit. The roads here looked unfamiliar. The green reflective signs were no longer pointing toward places she recognized. Town names flashed by remote, unfamiliar, like whispers from another life. For a moment, Claire felt as if she were drifting into a story she hadn't planned. To be part of her son, Ethan, sat in the passenger seat. 16 years old, headphones dangling loosely around his neck, one sneaker tapping quietly against the floorboard. He wasn't complaining, not even sighing with impatience. That surprised her. Most teenagers would have grown by now, or at least made a joke about their mother's terrible sense of direction. But Ethan sat still, watching the passing blur of trees and the occasional dim streetlight. "Mum," he finally said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "I think we're lost." Claire's lips curled into a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know. But don't worry, we'll figure it out. It's just a detour." Her voice was steady, but inside she felt the twinge of something more. Not fear of the road, she wasn't the type to panic over a wrong turn. The GPS would eventually fix itself, and they'd find their way back. What unsettled her was the silence between them, the strange distance she couldn't quite explain. She glanced at Ethan from the corner of her eye. His profile was sharper, now no longer the soft roundness of childhood, but the beginnings of manhood. A jawline she hadn't noticed before, shoulders broader than she remembered. His voice, when he spoke, no longer carried the light, high notes of a boy, but the deeper timbre of a young man. When had that happened? Claire's heart tightened. Parenting had a way of making time blur. Days dragged, but years vanished. She remembered when Ethan had been small, begging her to keep the nightlight on because he was afraid of the shadows. She remembered when his hands were tiny enough to wrap around just one of her fingers. And now he sat beside her in silence. A mystery she wasn't sure she could solve. The car's headlights stretched forward into the blackness, slicing through the night. Claire tried to focus on the road, but her thoughts kept circling back to Ethan. His silence wasn't just the silence of a teenager lost in thought. It was heavier, intentional. He wasn't just quiet, he was holding something in. And she felt it, like an invisible thread pulling at her. The road signs kept flashing. Strange towns with names she didn't recognize. She realized, almost with a laugh, that she didn't care about being lost on the highway. The real lostness, the one that mattered, was the distance between her and her son. She reached for the radio, her fingers brushing the dial, but then she stopped. Filling the silence with music would only make it louder. Instead, she cleared her throat softly. "You okay?" Ethan turned his head slightly toward her, his expression unreadable in the dim glow of the dashboard. "Yeah," he said. Just one word. But the way he said it told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't okay. Claire nodded slowly, not pressing him yet. Pushing too hard never worked. She knew that much. The highway stretched on endlessly, mile after mile of shadows and empty road. Claire felt the pull of exhaustion in her eyes, but also a sharper pull, the kind that came from a mother's intuition. Something was coming. A conversation she hadn't expected, maybe even dreaded. Ethan shifted in his seat, tugging at the zipper of his hoodie. His fingers moved restlessly, as if he were working up the courage to say something. Claire's heart gave a small jolt. Yes, here it was. She kept her eyes on the road, though every nerve in her body was focused on him. "Mom," he whispered. Finally. His voice was low, hesitant, but laced with a kind of seriousness that made her pulse quicken. "Yes?" She asked softly, bracing herself. He hesitated, his lips parting, then closing again. She could almost see the storm inside him, words swirling, struggling to be spoken. "There's something I need to tell you," he said at last. "Something I've been keeping inside. And I don't know how you'll react." The words hung in the air like a secret carried by the night itself. Claire's grip on the wheel tightened. The road ahead stretched on, endless, but for the first time, she felt as though the world around them had stilled. She didn't answer right away. Her breath caught in her chest. Memories of her own youth, of secrets she once carried, rushed back to her. She knew this moment. She knew the weight of it. Her son was about to trust her with something that could change everything. And as the car rolled down the unfamiliar highway, Claire felt something far greater than being lost in the dark. She was about to step into uncharted territory, not on the road, but in her relationship with Ethan. The headlights illuminated the stretch of highway ahead, but the real question lingered in the silence between them. What truth was he about to share?